All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, welcome. Thank you all for taking the time to attend today. We're going to talk about Oregon wildfire debris transport regulations and requirements. Just a couple quick things that I do want to talk about, housekeeping items. Today's presentation is being recorded, so please mute your microphone in the Zoom application. If you're using the application as your video and calling in via phone for your audio, I would ask that you also turn down your desktop sound and please mute your microphone if you are not actively speaking. We will have some time for Q&A, and when you ask questions, we would just ask that you introduce yourself and with whom you're associated with before speaking. So an example of that would be, I'm Andrea and I'm with Commerce and Compliance. We will pause throughout the presentation to allow time for questions specific. And then we've also created some time at the end for overall Q&A. As I mentioned, my name is Andrea and I'll be your facilitator today. My pronouns are she, and again, this webinar is being recorded. So we are just going to go ahead and dive right in. Our first topic is around registration and tax credentials, and this is going to be presented by Audrey Lawson, our Salem Services Section Manager. Audrey? Audrey, are you available? Okay, doesn't seem like Audrey is available currently. We can go ahead and move on to over-dimension permitting. And this will be presented by Charlie Hudo. Charlie, are you available?
Yep, can you hear me, Andrea?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
You're good, Charlie.
Okay, cool. All right, I'll start talking. Hi, my name is Charlie Hutto. I am the program coordinator for the over-dimension permit unit with the state of Oregon. So I'll be talking about the over-dimension permitting issues with big stuff. So can you go to the next slide, please, Andrea? So I always like to start by talking about what over-dimension means. Some people think it means different things, like all big trucks are over dimension or oversized, whatever, and that's just not quite true. In Oregon, we consider over dimension if something is more than 8 feet 6 inches in width, more than 14 feet 0 inches in height, over legal axle and group axle weights. And what that means is there's federal formulas that are set up for how much weight you can haul on either on a tire or an axle or a group of axles, and that has to remain what we call legal. So just as an example, no single axle can exceed 20,000 pounds in weight, and no tandem axle can exceed 34,000 pounds. That's just legal axle weights in Oregon. And over dimension would be over the length limits as shown on what we call map 1 and map 7. And we can certainly send links or copies of those maps out if people do need those, no problem. Some roads in Oregon are more length restricted than others. Some roads are restricted to trailer length, some are restricted to overall length, some are both. The major highways and major freight routes and all the interstates allow up to a 53-foot semi-trailer in a truck-tractor semi-trailer combination, and no limit to the overall length, which is pretty common combination in the United States. And then there's length limits for other types of combinations as well. Next slide, please, Andrea. So we have 3 different permit types that I want to talk about as they apply to moving debris and other things related to cleaning up the fires. Multiple items with legal axle weights, multiple items with heavy haul weights, and then a single non-divisible item. And even though the picture in the back isn't of a fire emergency or anything like that, it's still a pretty cool picture when we had to move when we helped move an old steam locomotive down in the Chiloquin area several years ago. Pretty cool picture, I think. Next slide, please. So multiple items, legal axle weights, an over-dimension permit is required if you're more than 80,000 pounds up to 105,500 pounds. So 80,000 pounds or less, that's considered legal in Oregon, and there's no over-dimension permit required. There's definitely registration and tax credentials are maybe required at 80,000 or less. And hopefully that'll get talked about later on in the presentation. But there's no oversized permit required from us. You do have to maintain legal axle and group axle weights, which what we call weight table 1 and weight table 2. And I talked a little bit about that at the beginning of my talk, that allows no more than 20,000 pounds on a single axle, no more than 34,000 pounds on a tandem axle. And where the group weights kick in, group axle weights, is just as an example on a standard 18-wheeler truck tractor semi-trailer combination. You can get 34,000 pounds on your tandem drive axles and 34,000 pounds on tandem trailer axles. There's still a minimum amount of space you have to have in there to get the full 68,000 pounds. And if you don't have, if they don't have enough space, then the carriers aren't able to put that much weight down. And usually with most of the modern equipment, even 48-foot trailers and longer, that's definitely no problem with that. But sometimes with shorter trailers, with doubles combinations, we'll occasionally get into issues with that. ODOT Director Chris Strickler's letter from September 14th of this year qualifies as a permit. So they're able to do some things with that letter, and that qualifies for the extended weight permit. And that's what we call it. If you were to call and ask us for the multiple items legal weight permit over 80,000 pounds, we would get you an annual extended weight permit, which covers most of the state highways up to certain length limits. Next slide, please, Andrea. The next one I'll talk about is multiple items with heavy haul axle weights. And what heavy haul axle weights mean is weights that exceed those allowed legally. Usually it's for a single non-divisible item, so one big thing. So that one picture at the top there was taken out near Madras a few years ago. It's one piece, I think it was a bridge girder or a bridge deck or something they were hauling on US 97 there behind on the backside of Mount Hood. Just a cool picture. The second picture there on the bottom, that's a big giant, I think it's a water condenser or an air purification system or something like that was moving at night through the Hillsborough area. One big, giant, huge thing, which requires permits and lights and signs and flags and things like that. Anyway, for cleaning up after the fires, there's a permit called the Stafford Act permit, and what that is if the President of the United States declares an emergency under this thing called the Stafford Act, and there's a bunch of legalese around that, we are allowed to issue permits on interstate highways for heavy haul axle weights when hauling a divisible load. Normally, if a carrier is hauling a divisible load like sand or potatoes or televisions or whatever, and they're over axle weight, we make them legalized. We don't write them a permit. They have to just take stuff off, take off, load less sand or load fewer televisions or whatever. When it's in response to the emergency, we can issue a permit for interstate highways. So it's just I-5, I-205, I-84, et cetera, just permits or highways that have an I in front of it. So no US routes, no Oregon routes, OR routes, just interstate routes. The third bullet point there, where the movement is not allowed on non-interstate highways, I have that in red for right now because that is something we're talking about and trying to see if we can get through. We're not sure if we can do that yet because this particular fire emergency was the first one that the president has declared on for Oregon. And because he declared on September the 11th, 2020, how the federal laws are, the Stafford Act permits have to expire no more than 120 days after the presidential declaration. So that's January 9th, 2021. So just a few weeks away. I know we have inquired as to whether that will be extended. I think we're waiting on that, and we'll just have to see what happens with that. But for right now, today you can call us up, ask us for the Stafford Act permit, and we can get you one, which will allow you to haul heavy haul weights on interstate highways. It's not allowed for other highways at this point. Next slide, please. A single non-divisible load. So this is going to be one big thing that cannot be reduced or easily dismantled. So something you can't take apart or cut in half without destroying the value of the commodity being hauled. We can issue permits for that. We are allowed to do that. There are federal and state laws that allow us to do that. We have annual permits which allow movement for up to 12 feet wide, 14.6 high, 98,000 pounds gross weight. And again, those heavy haul axle weights, which will get you up to 43,000 pounds. on a tandem axle, for example, and then covers a lot of the state highways. It doesn't cover all of them. There are some roads out in the middle of nowhere that are really windy and narrow and have limited sight distance and other issues. So we require a single trip permit for those, so we can add extra pilot vehicles or extra provisions to the permit so it can be done safely. So that's what that last bullet point is. For loads that exceed those dimensions or routes, we issue permits for that. Just talk about a couple of pictures there. And what we're trying to avoid now. This is the one on the top left. That's a legal size truck, obviously just a Walmart box trailer crossing under a really low railroad trestle in near Salem, and it gets hit all the time because people they're just following their GPS and not observing that there's big signs that say 12'2" height restriction out there. The one on the bottom is a little bit more serious. You can see this is the bridge on US 101 near Reedsport down in Southern Oregon, and it has a 14'6" height restriction there on the fog line, as indicated by the sign. And last year, a load that was 15 feet 4 inches high crossed underneath it, and we required them on the permit to straddle the center line, which means to move over and basically shut traffic down and go across the middle of the bridge where there was enough height, but they didn't follow the provisions of their permit, hit the bridge. And if you look really close, you can see that they damaged the first two bridge beams across the top. The bridge was closed for a little while and had to get inspected, and the driver got in a lot of trouble for hitting a structure. We don't take too kindly to that. Ultimately, it was repaired and got back to normal. But this is the kind of thing that we're trying to avoid, and why permits are required for oversizes, even in emergency situations, is we don't want to cause another emergency just in response to a current emergency. So we do need permits for that. Next slide, please, Andrea. So how to obtain an OD permit. Our unit is open Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time. We are closed on all state holidays. So coming up next will be Christmas and New Year's on December 25th and January 1st. I have on there, we're closed from 12 to 1 on Wednesdays for staff meetings. We haven't had one for a while, so we've been open during that time. Our phone number really is 503-373-0000. We somehow got lucky and got all the zeros when we got our phone number years and years ago. If you do call to get a permit and you are responding to a fire emergency, please indicate that when you're talking to our staff about that. We have procedures in place that we will expedite the permits that are being issued in response to the emergency. So we'll bump them ahead of all the others that are in the queue that are not emergencies, and get them taken care of as quickly as we can. Usually within a few minutes at the most, we can get those issued. The one horror story I'll mention from several years ago is we had somebody was moving I think it was a bulldozer or an excavator from Washington State down to some fires in Eastern Oregon. So they came into our scale at Umatilla and need to get their permit. So they called us at 4 o'clock or so on a Friday and ordered their permit, but didn't tell us that they were responding to the emergency in Eastern Oregon. And so we just had to sit in the queue for the weekend. And Monday morning, I came in at 7 o'clock to this slew of emails and voicemails about why didn't this thing get delivered, and nobody told us it was an emergency. So once we found that out, I think I got it issued in 10 or 15 minutes, got it out the door and got it issued. But it was just unfortunate that this piece of equipment sat in a parking lot in Umatilla for a whole weekend instead of being put to work and doing the right thing to get the fires put out and things taken care of. So please indicate you're responding to the fires, and we will expedite your permit issuance. Next slide. Yeah, I think we'll turn it over to Abe. Go ahead, Andrea, you can take over from here.
Really quickly, does anybody have any questions related to overdimension permits that they'd like to throw at Charlie?
And I'll definitely be sticking around till the end too. So if you have any questions when we're done, I'll be glad to answer them then.
Okay, and it looks like Audrey has joined us. Audrey, are you available?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
We can. Sounded like you were having some audio problems originally.
Yes, I had needed to see how many devices I can plug into get this to work. But I have all sorts of things plugged into me now. So you can see me, you can hear me, so I'm good to go.
Okay, great. I'm going to go ahead and circle back with registration and tax credentials and cover that prior to our hours of service.
Thanks, Andrea. So my name's Audrey Lawson. I'm the Motor Carrier Services Manager here at Commerce and Compliance. Yeah, there's my contact information there. You'll want to write that down if you need any assistance. So next slide, Andrea. Okay, so I don't know who I have in the virtual audience here, so I'm just going to kind of go over some credentials and registration requirements 101. Three things that you'll need to operate legally in Oregon is one is permit operating authority, one is to have a weight mile tax credential, the third is registration. Go ahead, next slide. So for permit authority, most of Oregonians or Oregon-based carriers probably have this already, but now is a good time because we're in the heat of our renewal season is to make sure that these things are all in place and registries are all in order or anything like a heavy vehicle use tax is taken care of. One is to make sure your US DOT number is active and, MCS 150, the biannual submission has been put in place. Second, if you're hauling a processed commodity, you'll need an MC number to operate interstate. Then all interstate carriers need to have insurance with FMCSA. If you're Oregon-based carrier, we'll need your Form E or Form H, depending on what you're operating or what you're hauling as a commodity here on file. And then you'll need to make sure that your UCR is up to date. And the reason I say that it's a good time to make sure these are all in place is because we want to make sure that everybody's is able to conduct business and transactions with CCD. And we want to kind of eliminate as many delays that can come up during the renewal process. Next. Okay, so weight mile tax, all vehicles over 26,000 pounds are required to enroll in our weight mile tax program. If you have Oregon-based registration, that comes automatically with your registration and your YC or Y plates. Next. So there are two options, as I've said, if you have Oregon plates, you're automatically enrolled. If you're an out-of-state carrier and elect to operate on temporary passes, those can be obtained by calling our service center here. Our contact center operates 7 days a week from 5 a.m. to 12 midnight, and they can be purchased over the phone, in which case we take your vehicle information and then distribute via email or fax. If you're automatically enrolled in the weight mile tax program, there are some filings that need to take place as well. One of them is a bond for new carriers, and those have to be posted within 60 days of establishing your account here in Oregon. And then your tax is paid not on the temporary pass as you go, but it's paid either on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis through filings, and normally those are done up through Trucking Online. Next. Registration for Oregon-based carriers, if you're over 26,000 pounds and have 3 or more axles, and you're operating interstate, you would get a YA plate and register through our IRP program. If you're operating solely in Oregon, you would be issued a YC plate. Those that are operating on the temporaries can elect to operate on 10-day heavy vehicle registration trip permits. Those are $43. And also, if you needed a temporary weight increase or a temporary heavy trailer trip permits, those can be obtained through CCD as well. $10 for the trailer permit for good for 10 days, $5 for the vehicle registration weight increase permit. Thank you. Registration for out-of-state carriers, again, out-of-state carriers will have to register through IRP through their base state if they don't have Oregon basing or a location here in the state of Oregon, or purchase the 10-day $43 trip permit. Operations under 26,000 pounds would get a light vehicle trip permit through DMV or have base state registration. Next. Okay, so how to obtain tax registration and credentials. Because of the COVID conditions, our lobbies are closed to the public and by appointment only. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. at our 2 locations. We have one at Portland Bridge and one here at our headquarters in Salem. So because we're restricted as to how many carriers that we can see within the office, there are a finite number of appointments or people that we can see. And I think I've calculated to about 200 between now and the end of the year. So if anybody was interested or had an interest in conducting the renewals in person, I would strongly encourage you to make those appointments now before they begin to fill up. The alternative would be to conduct your business through trucking online or giving us a call at our contact center. That's a 378-6699 number. And then we can evaluate your account and look for options to conduct that business before the end of the year and your registration credentials expire. Again, I would really encourage you to either use trucking online, which is, there are no lines. We can handle many carriers at one time, and that's open 7 days a week, 24 hours. And then secondly, I wanted to also extend, if you wanted us to, and we've done this with a few carriers already, if you wanted us to kind of evaluate your accounts to see if there are things that need to be remedied with a couple of carriers that we've found already. There's been a lapse in assumed business name registry or corporate status. We were able to identify those things quickly, and so that the carriers can go out and speak to the other agencies to get those updated and again, to mitigate any delays with your transactions. Next slide. Hey, Charlie's on again.
Any questions related to registration and tax credentials for Audrey?
All right, I'm also here till the very end, so if anything else comes up, be sure to shoot them out there.
Thanks, Audrey. Next, we have Abe with us. He's going to talk to us about hours of service, and Abe is our safety training coordinator.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me, Audrey?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so we're on. Okay, my name's Abe Donovan. I'm the training coordinator here for the state. I'm the guy who goes out and trains all the inspectors, the police officers, and our safety staff on how to do truck inspections. Also, I'm kind of the guy who's in the book all the time and has to know all the rules and regulations of the federal rules. So let's talk about hours of service. For one, I had questions. I wasn't sure exactly what you all do, so I figured we'd start here with the definition of intrastate and interstate, because the hours of service are different between the two. Okay, interstate commerce means basically if you're crossing lines or if the load goes outside of the states, even if you don't cross the line. And I'll give you some examples. If you have loads that are going to a rail yard or to a shipping yard, even though your driver never left the state, they would be considered interstate. If they cross the line, say you're out of Grants Pass to get over to Gold Hill, most drivers have to drive down into California and back up to Gold Hill. That would be an interstate driver because they crossed the line, even though their work is going to be in Gold Hill. Okay. Even if you switch drivers, it's all about where the load is coming from and where the load is going to. If you have a load that came out of California, was delivering in Portland, but you had somebody pick it up in Oregon, switch drivers, that driver would still be an interstate driver based upon the origination and destination of the load. So it's really important to know that, because if you're interstate, then you're going to be limited to the interstate hours. However, if you're intrastate and stay solely within the state borders, the load's not going outside, then you can take advantage of those hours, which are extended a little bit. So go ahead up to the next slide. Okay. So hours of service, property only. Okay. For interstate, if you're the interstate person, after 10 hours of off duty, they can drive 11 hours in a 14-hour day. And their 34 or their weekly They can do 60 hours in 7 days or 70 hours in 8 days. Then, of course, if they do a 34-hour restart, it zeroes out their clock completely. They can work every day of the week just as long as they don't go over 60 and 7 or 70 and 8. Now, on the 60 and 7, 78, if you have drivers that are operating only Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday, then you're going to be restricted to the 60-hour rule. If you have drivers on the road every day of the week, then you can take advantage of the 70-hour rule. Okay. Now let's jump over here to intrastate. According to our OAR, if you're solely inside the state, after you get that 10 hours off duty, you can drive 12 hours in a 16-hour day. And your weekly hours go up as well by 10 hours. You get 70 and 7 or 80 and 8. And of course, you can use a 34-hour restart to zero that out. Okay, so there are some big advantages of if you're solely intrastate. Okay, next slide, please. If you're short haul, the standard driver, commercial motor vehicle driver, 10,001 pounds or greater, doing commercial work or doing commerce, has to do a logbook each and every day. However, there are exemptions to that rule. And this is a rule that a lot of drivers take advantage of. And it just changed recently. It used to be 100 air miles for short haul, but starting September 29th of this year, the feds extended it. So now if your driver stays within 150 air miles, and this could be interstate or intrastate, it doesn't matter, wherever you're starting your driving from. And I gave an example here in Salem. Okay, you draw a circle, 150 air mile circle, which is actually 172.6 statute miles. If they stay within that circle and return back to their normal work reporting location within 14 hours, they get 10 hours off between shifts, they're not required to do a logbook. They can do a time card. That time card can be kept back at the business. The time card only has to show start time, stop time, and total hours for the day. Not driven, but total hours for the day. Okay. It also goes in to say in the rule, if they're interstate, so if they do cross the borders, they can only drive 11 hours in that 14-hour period. However, if you stay intrastate inside our borders, then you can drive 12 hours in that 14-hour period. Okay, you don't get the 16 here, you only get 14 because the rule is very stringent on that. And then of course you can get the 60-70 and the 70-80. That does go out. So you can get the 60-70, 70-80. The thing about the short haul exemption is as long as you maintain, and as long as you stay within these parameters, the driver doesn't have to do a log. At any time that they fail these parameters, they can still go, they can still drive, they just have to do a logbook. For example, if they go outside the 150 air miles, they got to do a logbook for the day. If they go beyond the 14 hours, they got to do a logbook that day. So they can still do their 12 and 16 intrastate. However, if they go over that 14, they got to do a log. They wouldn't get this exemption. Okay. And I think I covered all that. Any questions on, or go ahead, next slide.
Next slide covers wildfire debris disposal, and I'm going to ask Mitchell to speak to that. So does anyone have any questions about hours of service or hours, the clarification between intra and interstate, anything like that for Abe? No? Okay.
All right.
Next, I'm going to ask Kristen Mitchell, Executive Director of ORRA, to speak to wildfire debris disposal and some landfill requirements.
Thank you, Andrea, but I am actually going to transfer that over to Gary Penning at Dry Creek Landfill. So he is on the line and ready to speak to this. So take it away, Gary.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Audrey?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Gary Penning. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs and Marketing for Dry Creek Landfill in Southern Oregon. And I'm going to talk about some of our experiences that we've had in just the recent months with wildfire debris showing up and some things that may help folks if they're going to be hauling into landfills or transfer stations with this debris. So some folks that have never hauled into a landfill may not realize that we've got protocols that we have to abide by as far as the waste that comes in. So we need to know if the debris contains any asbestos, heavy metals, or other chemicals, maybe like hydrocarbons from maybe a fuel spill, somebody had an oil barrel on site or whatever, and we treat those wastes differently. So before you show up, we need to make sure you've checked with whichever landfill or potentially transfer station that you're going to be hauling to, that you know what paperwork you need to have. For asbestos, you need to show that that material has been abated. If it's general debris and or if it is asbestos containing material, then you have the proper documentation and you prepare that load to the standards that are required by DEQ and OSHA for us in order to take it. So, and every landfill is different. So you really need to check with whichever facility you're going to be using. The other thing is you need to make sure you got an account set up. There's going to be lots of folks coming in and hundreds of vehicles over our normal waste streams. And typically a landfill or transfer station may have 200 to 300 trucks coming into it in a typical day. Well, that volume of trucks could easily double or triple with this wildfire debris coming in. So the last thing we want is for our scales to be tied up, waiting for somebody to say, oh, I don't have an account or I don't have the proper paperwork. You're just going to get turned away. So you need to make sure you have the proper documentation. You need to make sure that the material is packaged right, that it's tarped or covered with plastic or however the contractor deems it necessary to get it transported to landfill. The other thing that's going to happen is, we're going to have lots of out of the area drivers that aren't familiar with the traffic patterns or how the operations work at the landfill. Some of you folks come in, maybe used to going into the landfill. So there may be different entrances set up for wildfire debris or solid waste that isn't normal. So again, that's something you need to be checking with the local provider that's going to be taking care of the disposal. There may be different safety standards on site. There may be more than one, what we call active face of the landfill. And the active face is where the trash is actually dumped. The whole landfill isn't open to accept waste. There's only small areas that we accept the waste in. Well, with these kind of volumes, we may have 1, 2, or 3 different active faces taking different types of material. Maybe one for MSW, maybe one for asbestos, maybe a third for dirt and ash. There may be a fourth for trees or stumps or whatever's being removed. So you need to really pay attention to what's going on and check with the local landfill or transfer station. The other thing that would really be handy, and most landfills all operate on certain CB channels. So having a CB and knowing what channel the landfill is using, because that's typically the way, once you leave the scale or the weighing facility, how you contact and communicate with the operators. There may be spotters. So people need to be very alert and paying attention. The other thing is you need to check with the operating hours and days of these facilities. They may be extended due to the volume of materials coming in. Normally that landfill may close at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They may stay open until 7 o'clock. And here's a list of the landfills that may be potentially taking material. I would strongly suggest that you contact these folks, get to know them and find out what they are and are not willing to take, or what their permits allow them to take or not, or what isn't permitted there. So that's just sort of a short overview, but we hate to turn people away, but when we have this kind of volume of material coming in, we can't tie the scales up waiting for someone to say, oh, I need to get a credit card to pay for this, or no, we don't have an account set up, or oh no, I do not have the paperwork showing that the asbestos has been abated and this load is free of any, hazardous materials. So that's just really sort of a quick overview of the landfill operations, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And my contact information is on this slide, so feel free to call me afterwards, or if you have any specifics that you don't think of right now that you'd like to have answered. So thank you. Take any questions.
Thanks, Gary. Does anyone have any questions regarding landfill requirements or resources for Gary? No? Okay. The next slide is just a list of resources that are primarily commerce and compliances. Kristen does have a copy of this slide deck, and Kristen, you're welcome to share that with any participant. Just wanted to provide some information there for you guys. And again, this slide deck does have all of our staff contact information. I'm just going to go ahead and open up the floor now, and I invite you guys to come off of mute, or if you'd prefer, go ahead and stick something in the chat of any questions that you have, anything you want clarity on regarding any of the topics that we've covered today. Does anybody want to add anything to our presentation that they feel like would bring value? Okay, Kristen, did you want to say anything in closing?
Well, first of all, I just wanted to thank you, Andrea, and also the rest of the team, Amy Ramsdell, who's the administrator of the Commerce and Compliance Division at ODOT, and all of the rest of your team for putting this together so quickly for us. We really appreciate this effort, and I do have the slide deck. We are recording this session. Once we have it edited, we'll share it back to you, Andrea, and also hopefully put it up on our website. So if you do have situations where you think people would benefit from viewing this who did not have a chance to attend today, they will be able to do so, because I think our goal is all the same, safety first for everyone on the roads out there, and making sure that these loads get delivered for disposal and they aren't turned away when they get there. So just my thanks to you, and if there's anything that we can do to help, please reach out to us. So thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. Glad that we could collaborate on this effort and reach out and give people the education that they need to really be successful in helping recover.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you all for your attendance and participation today. It's greatly appreciated. And as Kristen mentioned, this session has been recorded. It'll be available and the slide deck.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.